My name is Emily Rawlings, and I just turned 18. At my birthday party last night, my father pulled me aside and whispered, "When this is over, you're going to sign some papers for Uncle Frank. Just a formality." I smiled. I nodded. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened my laptop, and quietly transferred my entire multi-million-dollar inheritance from my grandparents into an irrevocable trust, just as a precaution. The next morning, my parents and my younger sister found out that the cabin, the savings, the investments, everything, was locked behind a legal wall they couldn't touch. My father turned white. My uncle, who had already signed a deal to sell property he never owned, called a lawyer. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 6 years to a summer at Pine Lake when my grandfather said something I didn't understand until last night. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather, Harold Rawlings, picked me up in his truck and drove me 40 minutes to Pine Lake. The cabin sat back from the water, surrounded by white pines so tall they blocked the afternoon sun. The porch sagged on one side. The screen door didn't latch right. It smelled like wood smoke and old books and something sweet I could never quite name. "Grab the other end," Grandpa said, lifting a fence rail. I did. We spent the morning replacing 3 rotted posts along the south side. He didn't rush me. He showed me how to check for soft spots by pressing my thumb into the grain. If it gives, it's done. Inside, Grandma Vivian had iced tea and 2 sandwiches waiting on the kitchen table, the one Grandpa built himself the year they got married. She was reading on the porch when I came out, and she patted the chair beside her. We sat and watched the lake until the light turned gold. "This cabin stays in the family," Grandpa told me that evening, wiping sawdust off his hands. "But family isn't always blood, Emily. Family is whoever shows up." I didn't fully understand what he meant. I was 12. I thought he was being poetic. He wasn't. That whole summer, I came back to Pine Lake every weekend. I learned where the water heater leaked, which window stuck, how to bleed the radiator. In October, Grandma taught me to organize the bookshelves by color because it made the room feel warmer. Grandpa showed me the property line markers, old iron stakes he'd hammered in himself. I didn't know then that my grandfather was already talking to a lawyer about exactly this place, about exactly me. Back home, the air was different. Our house in Ridgemont was fine. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed mowing, a garage my dad used as an office for his building supply store. Fine. Not warm, just fine. My sister Kelsey was 10 and she had the bigger bedroom, redecorated last spring. Lavender walls, a desk lamp that cost more than my entire bookshelf. My room still had the carpet from the previous owners. At dinner, my dad brought up the cabin. "Dad's place is just sitting there losing value," Greg said, cutting his steak. "Property taxes alone are killing us. We should sell it, reinvest." My mom nodded. "Makes sense." "Grandpa said the cabin stays in the family," I said. Greg laughed. Not a mean laugh. Worse, a dismissive one. "You were 12, Emily." He was being nice. Nobody asked me anything else. The conversation moved to Kelsey's debate trophy. Regional finalist. Very impressive. And Denise had already framed the certificate. I won the district science fair 2 weeks ago. The ribbon was still in my backpack. After dinner, I cleared the plates. On the counter, half hidden under a grocery list, there was a glossy flyer, Ridgeline Development. Lakefront lots. Premium prices. Now acquiring. There was a handwritten phone number in the margin. I didn't know whose handwriting it was, not my dad's. I put the flyer back exactly where I found it. Upstairs, I sat on my bed and thought about Grandpa's kitchen table. The one he built with his hands. The one where Grandma set my sandwich without asking what I wanted because she already knew. I thought about the flyer downstairs. Someone was already measuring my grandparents' home in dollar signs. Grandpa Harold died 2 years later. I was 14. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Gray sky, damp grass, folding chairs that sank into the lawn. I sat in the second row holding his handkerchief, blue plaid, frayed at the edges, smelling faintly of pine. At the reception, I noticed Greg and his brother Frank standing by the dessert table, not eating, talking low. Frank had a folder tucked under his arm. Greg kept nodding. I caught one sentence from Frank: "We should move on this before probate gets complicated." They were talking about the cabin at the funeral. I said nothing. I was 14. I had no power, no voice, and no idea that my grandfather already accounted for this exact moment. 2 years passed. I was 16. Grandma Vivian got sick in March and was gone by June. She held my hand the last time I visited, her grip surprisingly firm. "The cabin is yours, Emily," she whispered. "Don't let them take it. Promise me." I promised, Grandma. She squeezed once and closed her eyes. After the funeral, another gray day, same folding chairs. Greg sat at our kitchen table and said to Denise, "Now we can finally sort out the property." He said it with relief, like something heavy had lifted. That same evening, Frank called. I heard Greg on the phone in the garage, pacing. "Yeah, no, I agree. Let's get it moving." His voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. I was standing in the hallway holding a glass of water, and I realized something that sat in my chest like a stone. My grandmother's death wasn't a loss to them. It was a clearance. I didn't cry that night. I made a different kind of decision. I just didn't know how to act on it yet. Between 16 and almost 18, the cabin became my quiet rebellion. Every Saturday morning, I drove out to Pine Lake in the used Honda I bought with babysitting money. I patched the porch screen. I replaced the weather stripping on the back door. I swept pine needles off the roof because Grandpa taught me that's how leaks start. At home, the conversations shifted. The cabin stopped being Grandpa's place and started being the family property. Greg said this at dinner like it was always been true. Frank showed up more often now, every other Sunday. Sometimes with manila folders, sometimes with a laptop open to real estate listings. I tried once, "What about Grandma's wish?" She wanted me to keep it. Denise put down her fork gently, the way she does before correcting Kelsey's homework. "Your grandma was emotional at the end, sweetie. This is business." Business. That's the word they used for everything that used to be love. By 17, Greg started being more direct. "When you turn 18, we'll figure this out as a family." The way he said family, I knew it meant my way. One November afternoon, alone at the cabin, I was clearing out the hall closet. Behind a stack of old quilts, I found a sealed envelope in Grandma Vivian's handwriting. My name on the front. Inside, a single business card, Margaret Caldwell, attorney at law. Below her name, printed in small type, Rawlings Family Trust. My hands shook, not from fear, from recognition. Grandma left this here for me to find. She knew I'd be the one cleaning out closets. Not Greg, not Frank, me. I slipped the card into my wallet. I didn't call. Not yet. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Margaret Caldwell called me first. The call came on a Thursday evening in February. I was in my room doing calc homework when my phone showed an unknown number with a local area code. "Emily, this is Margaret Caldwell. I was your grandparents' attorney." Her voice was steady, professional, and careful, like someone who'd rehearsed this opening. "I need to speak with you before your birthday. There are things you need to know, and there isn't much time." She told me to meet her the following Saturday at her office downtown. Alone, I went. Margaret Caldwell was in her late 50s, silver-haired with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her office was small, organized, and smelled like old paper and coffee. She sat across from me and opened a folder. "Your grandparents hired me 6 years ago," she said. "They established an irrevocable trust. The cabin, a savings account, and an investment portfolio. Total value approximately $2.1 million. All of it is held in the trust. You are the sole beneficiary." I felt the room tilt slightly. My grandparents left me everything. They transferred it into the trust while they were alive. Legally, it never entered their estate. It can't go through probate. Your father and uncle have no claim. She slid a document across the desk, a summary of the trust. My name on the second line. The title to the cabin was recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office 6 years ago. Your father doesn't know that. Why didn't they tell him? Margaret paused. Your grandfather said, and these are his words, "My sons will sell that cabin before the funeral flowers wilt." The room was quiet. I stared at the paper with my name on it. "There's something else," Margaret said. "Someone has been making inquiries at the county recorder's office about the cabin's title within the last month." I started paying attention after that meeting. Not suspiciously, just quietly. The next Sunday, Frank came over for dinner. Afterward, he and Greg disappeared into the garage. The door was open a crack. Not enough to see, but enough to hear. Frank's voice: "I already signed the purchase agreement with Ridgeline. $450,000. But we need the title clean before closing." "Greg, how do we get it clean?" Greg's voice: "Quit claim deed. Dad's gone. Mom's gone. We're the legal heirs. We quit claim the property to ourselves, record it, and sell." "Frank, is that legal?" "Greg, it's a standard real estate transfer between heirs. Nobody's going to question it." A pause, then Greg, quieter: "What about Emily?" My chest tightened. Frank's answer came fast, like he'd already thought about it. "She's 17, Greg. She can't do anything. And by the time she's 18, the sale goes through. Done deal. She'll be upset. She'll get over it. We'll give her a cut, 50 grand for college. She should be grateful." I stepped back from the garage door. My hands were cold. Frank had already signed a purchase agreement, $450,000 with a development company, for a cabin he didn't own on land held in a trust he didn't know existed. That night, I sat on my bed and texted Margaret 2 words: "They're accelerating." Her reply came in 3 minutes: "I expected that. Come see me Saturday. We'll prepare everything you need." I closed my phone and stared at the ceiling. In the next room, Kelsey was watching a show, laughing at something. Downstairs, my parents were loading the dishwasher, talking about weekend plans like nothing was happening. And in the garage, somewhere in Frank's folder, there was a contract that was already worthless. He just didn't know it yet. Saturday, Margaret's office. She laid out the timeline on a legal pad, drawing lines between dates like a battle plan. The cabin title is already under the trust. If Frank files a quitclaim deed, the county recorder should reject it because the chain of title won't match. The property hasn't been in your grandparents' personal name for 6 years. But if he submits additional documentation, an affidavit of heirship, maybe a falsified death certificate, he could create what's called a cloud on title. It won't give him ownership, but it could tie the property up in litigation for a year or more. So I have to act first. You have to act on time. She tapped the calendar. The moment you turn 18, you're a legal adult. You can formally accept the role of successor beneficiary. Once you sign, I file a lease pendens, a public notice of legal interest, at the county recorder's office first thing the next morning. That freezes the title. Nobody can record anything against it. I nodded. What do I need to do? Show up. Sign one document. I'll handle the rest. I sat with that for a moment. Should I tell my parents? Margaret took off her glasses. Your grandfather specifically asked me to protect you, Emily, not to negotiate with them. I drove home. Greg was in the kitchen, cheerful. Good news, kiddo. I'm throwing you a birthday party. Whole family, Saturday night. It's a big one. 18. He smiled. Denise smiled. Even Kelsey clapped. I smiled, too. My dad was planning my birthday party. My uncle was planning to sell my grandmother's cabin. And I was sitting at the kitchen table smiling because in 9 days I was going to let them think everything was going exactly according to their schedule. I'm going to be honest with you. Sitting in my room that night knowing what was coming was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Part of me wanted to walk downstairs and just say it, Dad, I know. But Margaret was right. If I tipped them off, they'd find another way around it. So I stayed quiet and I waited. Here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. I read them. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to turn. 5 days before my birthday, my mom sat down next to me on the couch. She was using her let's talk like adults voice. Soft, practiced, slightly rehearsed. Now that you're almost 18, Denise said, there are some family decisions we should make together. Together. The word landed like a costume. The cabin costs money to maintain, she continued. Taxes, insurance, repairs. Your dad's business has been struggling. And if we sell, we could pay off the debt and set up a college fund for you and Kelsey. Both of you. Grandma wanted me to keep it. Denise's expression shifted. A flash of impatience quickly smoothed over. Your grandma was very sentimental at the end, Emily, but sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. Greg walked in right on cue. I wondered if they planned this. I've already talked to a buyer, he said. Good price, fair deal. Who's the buyer? He blinked. A development company. Frank knows them. What company? A longer pause. Ridgeline something. They're reputable. I didn't push further. I'll think about it, I said. Craig patted my shoulder. That's my girl. He walked away satisfied, like he'd just closed a negotiation. Later that night, Kelsey knocked on my door. She was in pajamas, hair still damp from the shower. Emily? Yeah. She sat on the edge of my bed, picking at a thread on the comforter. Mom and Dad keep talking about the cabin at night after I'm supposed to be asleep. She looked at me sideways. They sound different, like they're planning something. Is something going on? I pulled the blanket over her feet. Don't worry about it, Kels. She nodded but didn't look convinced. I said I'd think about it. That's not a yes. And they knew it, which is why they'd keep pushing. Agar apn bi kabi jishi ace rishtadar ka samna kia hi jo samni kuch or peeth piche kuch or ho. To ubi channel ko subscribe carrion or muyi comments main betayan. Hyunk jo agli cheese hon wali ti, asan sabki hosh yura dai. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Frank showed up unannounced. He caught me in the driveway as I was coming back from the grocery store. Casual clothes, big smile, leaning against his car like he just happened to be in the neighborhood. Frank was a real estate agent. Nothing he did was accidental. Hey kiddo, got a minute? Just want to talk, Uncle to niece. We sat on the front steps. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Here's the thing, Emily. That lake lot, just the land alone, is worth $450. I can get us a deal with a buyer I trust. Fast close, clean paperwork. And what do I get? $50,000 cash for college. I let the number hang in the air. 50 out of 450. Frank smiled like I'd said something cute. You're 18, Emily. 50 grand is a lot of money for someone your age. Most kids would jump at that. Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Frank? The smile froze just for a second. A flicker behind the eyes, a micro-adjustment, then it was back. Your grandparents, but they're gone now. Passes to your dad and me as next of kin. That's not how it works. I knew it. He should know it. He sold houses for a living, but he was counting on me not knowing. I'll think about it, I said again. Frank stood, brushed off his jeans. Don't overthink this one, Emily. Opportunities like this don't wait. He drove away. Before he was even at the end of the street, he was on the phone. I could see his mouth moving through the driver's window. That night, I texted Margaret again, they're accelerating. She replied, stay the course. 3 more days. 3 more days. I can do 3 more days. The night before my birthday, I drove to the cabin alone. The road was quiet. Pine Lake sat flat and dark under a half-moon, and the pines along the bank looked like cutouts against the sky. I parked in the gravel patch Grandpa leveled himself. Walked up the porch steps. Second one still creaked. And sat in the chair next to the one that used to be his. The air smelled like rain and pine resin. I checked my email. Margaret had sent the full document package, the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, the beneficiary designation confirmation, a 1-page summary of the trust terms. Everything formatted, flagged with sticky tabs, ready for a signature. My signature. At midnight, I read each document twice. Then I closed my laptop and listened to the lake. Grandpa used to sit right here and say, patience isn't weakness, Emily. It's timing. I always thought he was talking about fishing. The tears came without warning. Not a collapse, not a breakdown, just a quiet overflow that I let happen. I cried because I wished this were different. I wished my dad had been the kind of man who would have taken me fishing at this lake instead of calculating its resale value. I wished my mom had asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what's practical. I wished I didn't have to sign a legal document at midnight to protect myself from the people who were supposed to protect me. But wishes don't hold up in court. Trust documents do. I wiped my face, locked the cabin door, drove home, lay down in bed, and set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. In 6 hours, I turned 18. In 7, my family found out that the cabin was never theirs to take. 11:50 p.m. My bedroom door was closed. The house was silent. Greg and Denise went to bed an hour ago, and Kelsey's light went off at 10. I opened my laptop and connected to the video call. Margaret appeared in her home office, reading glasses on, a stack of papers lit by a desk lamp. Ready? Ready. When the clock hits midnight, you are a legal adult in every sense that matters. I'll walk you through the signing. She went through it one more time, clear and precise. I signed the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, a single-page document that confirmed I was formally receiving the trust my grandparents created. From that second forward, every decision about the trust's assets ran through me and Margaret as co-decision makers. Now, she said, first thing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., I'll go to the county recorder's office and file a lease pendens. That's a public notice that says there's a legal interest pending on the property. Once it's recorded, no one can sell, transfer, or encumber the title while it's active. What if they've already filed something? Then whatever they filed will be flagged. The chain of title will show the trust recorded 6 years ago, not your father. Any conflicting document gets kicked back. I looked at the signed paper in my hand. My name in ink. My grandparents' names in print above mine. Margaret's voice softened just slightly. This isn't a trick, Emily. This is your grandfather's last gift. You just had to be old enough to accept it. The clock on my laptop read 12:03 a.m. I was 18. I was the legal beneficiary of the Rawlings family irrevocable trust. And downstairs in the garage, my uncle's quitclaim deed was already a dead document. He'd find that out in about 9 hours. My birthday party started at 4 in the afternoon. The living room was full, maybe 20 people. Neighbors, a few of my parents' friends from church, 2 of Greg's old business contacts, Kelsey's best friend's family. Nora Beckett from next door to the cabin was here too, sitting near the window with a glass of lemonade and sharp, watchful eyes. There were balloons, a banner that said Happy 18th in silver letters, a sheet cake from the bakery on Main Street. I smiled. I thanked everyone. I opened small gifts, a journal, a gift card, a picture frame. In my jacket pocket, folded into a neat square, was the signed acceptance form from last night. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. It was already done. Greg stood up near the cake table and tapped his glass. The room quieted. I just want to say Emily is officially an adult today. Denise and I are so proud of her. He paused, looking around the room. And as a family, we have some exciting plans for the future. He looked at me and smiled. Right, Emily? Every face in the room turned toward me. Thanks, Dad, I said. Nothing more. Greg waited a beat, then laughed it off and raised his glass. The room followed. Conversation resumed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Frank by the front door, checking his phone, typing something fast with both thumbs. Nora caught my arm as I passed by the window. She leaned in close, smelling like lavender hand cream. Your grandmother would want you to know something, she said quietly. I saw your uncle at the cabin last week with 2 men in suits. They were walking the lot line with a measuring tape. Frank had brought the buyers to the property before he even had the title. That's how confident he was. After the cake was cut and the plates were passed around, Greg stood again. This time his voice was louder, more deliberate, the voice of a man who'd been waiting for an audience. Before we wrap up, I want to share something with everyone. He put his hand on Denise's shoulder. Our family has been going through a tough time financially. Some of you know about the store. It's been hard. Sympathetic murmurs. But Harold and Vivian, my parents, they left us something. The cabin out at Pine Lake. And as a family, we've decided to sell it to secure everyone's future. We've decided. I felt the words land on my skin like cold water. He was announcing it in front of 20 people, like it was settled. He looked right at me. Emily understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us, right, sweetheart? The room waited. Every eye found me. Neighbors who'd known me since I was small. Nora with her lemonade. Kelsey half hidden behind the couch. Denise added, smiling, it's what responsible families do. We sacrifice for each other. I set my fork on my plate. The clink was the only sound in the room. I never agreed to sell the cabin, Dad. Greg's smile stayed fixed, but the muscles around his jaw tightened. She's kidding. Birthday nerves. I'm not kidding. Frank stepped forward from the doorway. Come on, Emily. This isn't the time or place. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, and set it down. You're right, Uncle Frank. This isn't the time. I held his gaze. The time is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Silence. Frank's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. No one in the room moved. The guests started leaving after that. Polite goodbyes, tight smiles, the kind of exit people make when they can feel a storm building inside someone else's house. Within 30 minutes, the living room was down to family, Nora, and 2 neighbors who seemed unsure whether to go or stay. Denise waited until the front door closed behind the last near stranger, then turned on me in the kitchen. Her voice was controlled but pitched just loud enough to carry. Do you have any idea what your father is going through? She stepped closer. He might lose this house, Emily. Our house, the one you sleep in every night. And you're holding on to a cabin you visit on weekends? I visit every weekend, Mom. That's not the point. She pressed her palms flat on the counter. We are a family. Families make decisions together. And if you loved this family, you wouldn't need a lawyer to tell you what to do. The room went still. I stared at her. How do you know about a lawyer? Denise didn't flinch. Frank found the business card in your bag last week. Margaret Caldwell. Who is she, Emily? My stomach dropped. Not from fear, but from the realization that they'd been going through my things, searching for something they could use. Before I could answer, Nora Beckett's voice cut through from the kitchen doorway, even and firm. That girl has every right to talk to a lawyer, Denise. Vivian would have wanted that. Denise wheeled around. This is a family matter, Nora. Please. Nora didn't move. She looked at me, then back at Denise. Vivian was my friend for 40 years. I think I know what she wanted. The silence between them could crack glass. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Not yet. Nora left. The neighbors slipped out behind her with quiet goodbyes. Now it was just the five of us. Greg, Denise, Frank, Kelsey, and me. Greg closed the kitchen door. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and folded his hands on the table like a man about to deliver terms. Here's what's going to happen, Emily. His voice was low, deliberate. Tomorrow morning, Frank and I go to the county office. We file the paperwork. The cabin sells. You get your share, a fair share, and we move on as a family. What's my share? 50,000. Out of how much? Craig didn't answer. Frank, leaning against the doorframe, filled the gap. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my dad. And if I say no? Greg's jaw set. If you fight this, you're on your own. No more help with college. No more living under this roof. The kitchen was very quiet. The faucet dripped once. You're threatening to kick me out on my 18th birthday. I'm asking you to be part of this family. I pushed back from the table. Stood up. My voice was steady even though my hands weren't. I am part of this family, Dad. I'm the part that keeps promises. I walked past Frank, past Kelsey, who was sitting on the stairs with her knees pulled to her chest, and I went upstairs. I closed my door. I sat on the bed and breathed. Greg thought his deadline was 9 a.m. at the county recorder's office. He didn't know that Margaret's deadline was 8. I sat on my bed that night holding the acceptance form I'd already signed at midnight. My dad had just threatened to remove me from my own family if I didn't hand over a cabin that was legally mine. My mom said I didn't love them. My uncle was planning to file a forged deed first thing in the morning. And all I could think was, my grandmother was right. She knew exactly who they would become when the money was on the table. And she planned for it years before it happened. If someone you loved ever prepared something to protect you, even after they were gone, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. Now, let me tell you what happened at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. The county recorder's office opened. The fluorescent lights flickered on. A clerk in a blue cardigan unlocked the front counter. Margaret Caldwell was the first person through the door. She was wearing a gray blazer and carrying a leather folder. She approached the counter, presented 2 documents, a certified copy of the Rawlings family irrevocable trust and a lease pendens notice, and asked for them to be recorded against the Pine Lake property. The clerk reviewed the paperwork, checked the existing title records, and stamped it recorded. Done. From this moment forward, anyone who pulled the title on the Pine Lake cabin would see notice of pending legal interest, Rawlings family irrevocable trust, Margaret Caldwell trustee, Emily Rawlings beneficiary. At 8:14 a.m., Margaret called me. It's done. The lease pendens is recorded. The property is flagged. Whatever they bring in will be rejected on chain of title grounds. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. Greg was upstairs getting dressed. Denise was making coffee. Normal morning sounds. Water running. A closet door. The clink of a belt buckle. At 8:30, Greg and Frank came downstairs together. Greg was wearing a button-down shirt, his business shirt, the one he wore to bank meetings before the store went under. Frank had a folder tucked under his arm. Same folder as always. We'll be back by lunch, Greg said, grabbing his keys. I looked up from my bowl. Good luck, I said. Greg paused in the doorway, looked at me. Something in my voice maybe, or something in my face. Then he turned and walked out. I rinsed my cereal bowl. I dried it. I set it in the cabinet, and I waited. I'll never know exactly what their faces looked like, but I know what happened because Margaret was still at the recorder's office when they walked in. She stayed on purpose. 9:05 a.m. Frank approached the counter. He slid the quitclaim deed across with a confident nod. Greg stood behind him, hands in his pockets, looking around the room like they'd be in and out in 10 minutes. The clerk took the document, typed the parcel number into the system, read the screen, typed again, then she stopped. I can't record this document, sir. Frank leaned forward. Excuse me? The property title is held under the Rawlings Family Irrevocable Trust. It was recorded in 2020. There's also a lease pendens filed this morning. That's impossible, Frank said. My parents owned that property. Sir, the deed was transferred to the trust 6 years ago. The chain of title is clear. This quitclaim doesn't match the current ownership record. Greg stepped up beside Frank. There's no trust. Our parents never mentioned a trust. The clerk glanced between them. I'd recommend you speak with the trustee listed on the filing. A Margaret Caldwell. Frank's hand went flat on the counter. His face drained. Margaret's name, the name on the business card they'd found in my bag, was now on a public record they couldn't erase. Greg turned to Frank slowly. You said this was simple. I didn't know about any trust. You're a real estate agent, Frank. How did you not check the title first? Frank opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The clerk said evenly, Gentlemen, I'll need you to step outside if there's a disagreement. Margaret, seated in the waiting area near the door, watched them leave. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The call came at 9:22 a.m. I was sitting on the porch watching the neighbor's sprinkler arc back and forth across the lawn. What did you do? Greg's voice was tight, shaking. I could hear traffic behind him. He was in the parking lot. I accepted what Grandpa and Grandma left me. That's all. You went behind our backs with some lawyer we've never heard of. Margaret Caldwell has been the trust attorney for 6 years, Dad. You just never asked. A beat of silence, heavy breathing. This is my parents' property, Emily. I'm their son. They chose to leave it to me. I kept my voice even. Not because they didn't love you, but because they didn't trust you with it. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. I counted the sprinkler rotations, 3 full arcs, before he spoke again. We'll fight this. You can try, but the trust is irrevocable. That means even I can't dissolve it. There's nothing for anyone to undo. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, Dad. I've had 3 months to learn. He hung up. No goodbye, just a click and dead air. I set the phone on the porch railing. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, not from fear, from the weight of saying those words to my own father. From knowing that the man who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6 is the same man who just tried to sell my grandmother's home out from under me. I sat there until the shaking stopped. It took a while. Then my phone buzzed again. An unfamiliar number. A man's voice, brisk and corporate. "Miss Rawlings, this is Carter Briggs from Ridgeline Development. We need to talk." Carter Briggs spoke the way developers do. Fast, factual, and already calculating his next move before the current sentence ended. "We have a purchase agreement with Frank Rawlings for the Pine Lake property. He guaranteed clean title. We've just been informed there's a lease pendens on the parcel." "That's correct. Can you explain the situation, Mr. Briggs?" "My uncle does not own that property. He never did. The cabin and the land have been held in an irrevocable trust since 2020. I'm the sole beneficiary." A pause. The sound of papers shifting on the other end. He represented himself as the heir. "I understand, but representation doesn't create ownership. I'd recommend you discuss this with him and possibly with your own attorney." Another pause, longer this time. "Miss Rawlings, is there any possibility of a sale? We'd be prepared to make a competitive offer directly to the trust. The property is not for sale." "Understood." His voice hardened slightly. "Then we'll be pursuing our remedies against Mr. Rawlings." I gave him Margaret's number. Within the hour, she confirmed to Ridgeline's legal team what I already told Carter. The trust was valid. Frank had no authority, and the purchase agreement was executed based on a misrepresentation of ownership. Ridgeline's response was immediate. They were pursuing Frank for breach of contract, the $45,000 penalty clause, plus damages. That afternoon, Margaret called with one more piece of information. Her voice was careful but direct. "Emily, the quitclaim deed Frank tried to file, it included a notary stamp. I had the recorder's office pull a copy before they rejected it. The stamp doesn't match any registered notary in the county. It appears to be forged." I closed my eyes. "That's a felony, isn't it?" "In this state, yes. My uncle didn't just try to steal my cabin. He committed a crime to do it." Greg came home at 2 in the afternoon. He moved through the front door like a man carrying something invisible and very heavy. Denise was already in the kitchen, arms crossed, face blotched from what I'm guessing was an hour of angry crying. I was at the dining table. I didn't get up. Greg sat down across from me. He stared at the table for a long time. "I'm going to lose this house, Emily." His voice was flat, emptied out. "The bank is on me for $180,000. The store is gone. That cabin was supposed to be our way out. I know you're struggling, Dad. I'm sorry about the business. Then help us. The cabin was never your way out. It was Grandpa and Grandma's gift to me." "A gift?" He almost laughed. "For what? You're 18. What does an 18-year-old need with a lakefront cabin? It's not about what I need. It's about what they wanted." Denise stepped in from the kitchen doorway. "They were old, Emily. They weren't thinking clearly at the end. They were thinking clearly enough to hire a lawyer 6 years before they died." Greg slammed his palm on the table. "I'll contest the trust." A voice came through my phone. I'd called Margaret before Greg walked in and left the line open on speaker. Not to trap him, to save time. "Mr. Rawlings." Margaret's voice was steady, professional. "Contesting an irrevocable trust that was established 6 years before the grantor's deaths, with full legal capacity documented and witnessed, will cost you more in legal fees than the property is worth. I'd strongly advise against it." The kitchen was silent. The faucet dripped. Greg looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in my father's eyes before. Not anger, recognition. 2 hours later, Frank called the house. Greg picked up in the living room. I was in the hallway, close enough to hear every word through the thin wall. Ridgeline is suing me. Frank's voice was stripped raw. 45,000 in penalties plus damages. They're saying I committed fraud. Greg's reply was cold. Colder than I'd ever heard him. Did you? I thought we owned it. Greg, you're a real estate agent. You do title searches for a living. How did you not check? I assumed. You assumed. And now I'm sitting here with nothing because you assumed. You wanted the money, too. But I didn't forge a notary stamp, Frank. A long silence. I didn't forge. I just found a stamp. And that's forgery. You know that's forgery. Frank's breathing got heavier. I need a lawyer. So do I. Greg paused. Don't call this house again until you've talked to one. He hung up. I heard him sit on the couch. The springs creaked. Then nothing. I went upstairs. Kelsey's door was open. She was sitting on her bed with headphones around her neck, eyes wide. Is Uncle Frank in trouble? Yeah, Kelsey. He is. Is Dad? I sat on the edge of her bed. Dad made bad choices, but Uncle Frank made worse ones. She nodded slowly, processing it the way 15-year-olds do, not fully understanding, but knowing enough to be scared. I went to my room, sat by the window, and looked out at the street. A dog walker passed. A sprinkler hissed. The world went on. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt like someone who just walked through a fire and hadn't checked yet to see what got burned. Over the next 3 weeks, the consequences fell like dominoes. And each one made a sound. Ridgeline Development filed a civil suit against Frank Rawlings. Breach of contract, misrepresentation of title, and demand for the $45,000 penalty plus an additional $60,000 in damages and legal costs. Their attorney sent the complaint by certified mail to Frank's duplex. He signed for it on a Tuesday. The county district attorney's office received a referral from the recorder's office regarding the forged notary stamp. An investigator was assigned. Frank's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome, which meant his income, such as it was, stopped. Word traveled in a small town. Not because I said anything, I didn't. But court filings are public record, and Ridgeline's lawsuit named the Pine Lake property by parcel number. The neighbors at the lake read the local paper. They talked. By the second week, the story had made its way through the Rotary Club, the church parking lot, and the checkout line at Hanson's Market. Frank called me once. I answered. Emily, please, can you ask your lawyer to drop the lease pendens? If the title is cleared, I might be able to negotiate something with Ridgeline, reduce the penalty. The lease pendens protects my property, Uncle Frank. It stays. Your grandparents would be ashamed of you. I let the sentence sit for a moment. Then I said quietly, my grandparents are the ones who set this up. They chose this. They chose me. So I don't think shame is what they'd feel. He hung up. I set my phone down and looked at the wall. There was a framed photo of Grandpa Harold on my desk, the one from the summer I was 12. Both of us standing by the fence we fixed. I left it where it was. Greg didn't contest the trust. Margaret was right. The legal fees alone would bury him, and the case would go nowhere. An irrevocable trust established by mentally competent grantors, witnessed, notarized properly, and recorded years before their deaths, is about as airtight as a state law gets. Instead, Greg did what he should have done 2 years ago. He sold the building supply store at a loss, but enough to negotiate a repayment plan with the bank. The house stayed, barely. The savings didn't. Denise went back to work for the first time in a decade. She took a position at a pharmacy on Lincoln Avenue, the same chain where she worked before Kelsey was born. She didn't talk about it much. When neighbors asked, she said she wanted to stay busy. Nobody believed that, but nobody pushed. The town knew. Not every detail, but enough. Harold Rawlings' sons tried to sell his cabin, and the granddaughter stopped them. That's the version that circulated at the diner, at PTA meetings, at the gas station on Route 12. Some people thought I was brave. Some people thought I was cold. I didn't correct either group. Greg and I didn't speak for 2 weeks after that morning. The house was quiet in a way that felt permanent, like the silence had weight. Nora Beckett brought me pie one afternoon. Apple, still warm. Your parents made their choices, she said, setting the tin on my desk. But they're still your parents. Don't carry their shame. That's theirs. I nodded. Then Kelsey called one evening. She was at a friend's house. Voice small. Emily? Yeah. I don't understand everything that happened, but I'm sorry they put you through this. My throat tightened. Thanks, Kels. Are you okay? I'm getting there. I drove to the cabin on a Saturday morning in late April. The dogwoods along the lake road were blooming, white and pale pink against the dark water. I unlocked the front door with the same key Grandpa gave me when I was 14. In case you ever need to get in when we're not here, he'd said. I didn't know then that he meant permanently. The cabin smelled the same. Pine and old books and that sweet faint something I'd never been able to name. I walked through every room. The kitchen table Grandpa built, still solid, still level. Grandma's bookshelves, organized by color. The bedroom where she'd read to me when I was small. The porch where Grandpa and I watched the lake turn gold. In the desk drawer by the window, I found an envelope. My name on the front in Grandpa Harold's handwriting. Margaret told me it would be there. She'd been saving it for after the trust was settled. I opened it carefully. It was a letter, 1 page, written in blue ink. His handwriting getting looser toward the bottom, the way it always did when he was tired. He told me he knew his sons would try to sell the cabin. He didn't blame them. Greg was his boy and he loved him. But Greg never understood the difference between something that had value and something that was valuable. He said he chose me not because I was perfect, but because I was the one who asked whether the roof needed patching before I ever asked what the place was worth. The last line said, "Take care of it. It took care of you first." I folded the letter. I sat on the porch. I breathed. Margaret called me the following week. Good news. The lease pendants can be withdrawn now that there's no active threat to the title. Once it's cleared, the property record will show the trust as sole owner. Clean, no encumbrances, no clouds. And Frank? He settled with Ridgeline, paid the $45,000 penalty out of a personal loan. The deal is dead. As for the forged notary stamp, the district attorney's office is reviewing the case. He could face a misdemeanor charge, possibly a felony, depending on how the investigation goes. And his license is suspended indefinitely. He can petition for reinstatement, but not while there's an active criminal referral. I sat with that for a moment. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt the kind of exhaustion that comes after a long illness. Not sick anymore, but not quite well either. There's one more thing, Margaret said. In the trust documents, your grandparents designated a separate educational fund, $50,000, earmarked specifically for your college expenses. It's been accruing interest for 6 years. The current balance is just over $58,000. My eyes stung. $50,000. The same number Greg offered me as my share of the sale. The same number Frank dangled like a bribe. My grandparents had already set it aside quietly without telling anyone. Emily, are you there? Yeah. My voice cracked just barely. I'm here. Your grandparents would be proud. I just kept a promise, Margaret. I enrolled at Ridgemont Community College that week, environmental science with a minor in forestry. The campus was 20 minutes from the cabin, closer than my parents' house. I filled out the housing forms. Under current address, I wrote the cabin's address for the first time. It felt like coming home, because it was. I asked Greg and Denise to meet me at the coffee shop on Birch Street. Neutral ground. Not the house, not the cabin. Somewhere public, somewhere calm. They arrived together. Greg was wearing a flannel I hadn't seen in years. One of Grandpa's. I realized Denise had her purse clutched tight against her side, the way she holds things when she's nervous. We ordered. I waited until the cups were on the table. I love you, I said. Both of you. I need you to know that because what I'm about to say might not sound like it. Denise's jaw tightened, but she nodded. The cabin is not for sale. Not now. Not ever. I won't be made to feel guilty for keeping a promise I made to Grandma. A promise she trusted me to keep because she didn't think anyone else would. Greg stared into his coffee. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I continued. But if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be built on respect. Not on what I can give you financially, not on guilt, not on the idea that I owe you something because you're my parents. Denise started to speak. We just wanted what was best, then start by being honest about what happened. You tried to sell something that wasn't yours. You threatened to kick me out. You went through my bag. She closed her mouth. Greg still hadn't looked up. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it today. I stood. I left enough cash for all 3 coffees. I'll call you Sunday. He nodded. One small nod. I walked out into the sunlight. Kelsey showed up at the cabin on a Sunday afternoon in May. She was carrying a pizza box and wearing the same oversized hoodie she'd had since 8th grade. I brought lunch, she said. Hope you like pepperoni. Always. We sat on the porch with paper plates on our laps and the pizza box between us. The lake was still. A heron stood in the shallows near the dock, perfectly motionless, waiting for something below the surface. Kelsey ate slowly. She wasn't here for the pizza. I didn't know about any of it, she said finally. Mom and Dad never told me. I know. Was I part of the problem? I looked at her. 15, thin-shouldered, still growing into the shape of whoever she'd become. She didn't choose any of this. She didn't ask to be the favorite. She didn't know the attention they gave her was taken from somewhere else. You were a kid, Kels. We both were. She nodded, pulled a piece of cheese off her slice, and set it on the edge of her plate. It's really beautiful here, she said, looking out at the water. Grandma used to say the same thing every single time she sat in that chair. Kelsey glanced at the empty chair next to mine. Grandpa's chair, the one with the armrest he'd sanded smooth. Can I come back sometimes? Anytime. She leaned her head against my shoulder just for a moment. Then she sat up and took another bite. We didn't talk about our parents. We didn't talk about trusts or lawsuits or forged documents. We talked about her school project, about the heron, about whether the dock needed new planks this summer. The cabin didn't just protect property. It made space for something new to start. Early June, 6 a.m. I was on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist lift off Pine Lake. The pines were sharp against a pale sky. A loon called somewhere out on the water. 2 long notes, then silence. I didn't win against my family. There's no winning when the people who hurt you are the people who were supposed to protect you. You don't get a trophy for surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. But I kept a promise. And for the first time in my life, I was standing somewhere that belonged to me. Not because I fought for it, but because 2 people loved me enough to plan for exactly this. They saw the storm before I did. They built the shelter before I knew I'd need one. My grandparents couldn't stop my parents from being who they are. They couldn't make Greg less desperate or Denise less afraid. They couldn't keep Frank from chasing money that wasn't his. But they could make sure I had ground to stand on. Literally. I thought about the letter in the drawer. About Grandpa's words, the difference between something that has value and something that's valuable. This cabin had both, but only one of them could be measured, and my family spent 2 years focused on the wrong one. I sip my coffee. The mist clears, the lake turns blue. If you're listening to this and you feel like nobody's in your corner, I want you to hear me. Sometimes the people who protect you aren't the ones standing in front of you. Sometimes they planned for you years ago, quietly, without telling anyone. And sometimes all you have to do is show up, sign the paper, and keep the promise. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from standing on something solid and knowing you built your life on it. That's my story. If it made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, or even just a little less alone, then it did what I hoped it would. Now, I have a question for you. If you could protect one thing in your life, a place, a person, a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. Check the description for more stories like this.